One of the most profitable skills that you can develop is learning how to write a proposal that can win a government contract. This is a skill set that most people just don't have, and it can help you win government contracts for your own business, but it can also help you sell your consulting service. Meaning it could be your niche, and companies pay a good money to individuals and consulting businesses that focus on proposal writing. So in this episode, we're bringing Colonel Louis Orndorff back. He was a 30-year plus government contracting officer. I worked with him in the Air Force. I work with him as a consultant, and I work with him in our certification program. He's one of our trainers, and he focuses on what you do after you're on contract. And he focuses on how to write a proposal, and he gives you the contracting officer's perspective. I'm telling you right now, you're going to hear things in this episode that you've never probably even considered as far as writing a proposal for the government. So if you've written proposals before, I think you're going to probably go back to the drawing board and make some major changes. If you're hearing this for the first time and you've never written a proposal, this is great because it's going to eliminate a lot of mistakes that most people make, including myself, by the way. So this is something that's so good that I went to the sales team for my business and I was like, hey guys, I need you to listen to this. I also gave it to my clients because I'm like, this is something that you should listen to before you write any proposal for anything. So it's that good. So hopefully you enjoy it. I know you'll take something away from it. Let's go win some contracts. Here's Colonel Orndorff.
Okay, so Rick asked me to step in today and talk to you guys about source selection from a contracting officer's point of view. I spent 32 years as an Air Force contracting officer, multiple unlimited warrants, supporting everything from major weapon systems to war zones. And if I had 3 commands as a DCMA commander, so both the front end of selecting the contracts or approving the release of the RFPs was one of my jobs as a competition advocate for both the Air Force District of Washington and the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, one of the major operating locations. So I've seen the whole spectrum. I've seen it from small, medium, large. I've seen it from the very beginning, from the initiation stages, well before you ever see market research, all the way to the end, where as a DCMA commander, I always talked that my job was to clean up all the messes that the contracting officers signed into contracts, which was actually probably the most valuable thing I ever did in my career, because as you see how to unravel those messes, you learn an awful lot about how to avoid them. And that's really the value of that. So what I'd like to do, again, the topic is source selection from a contracting officer's perspective. And give me one second, or I should say actually proposal writing. I just wanted to check my notes. So each one of you are probably focused on, you have to generate a proposal, and there's a lot of factors that go into this. And I want to talk to you about it from a contracting officer's perspective. I've had the opportunity, I retired in 2019. So since 2019, I've done an awful lot of consulting, and I've been on the contractor side of generating proposals and listening to the whole red team, the whole colored team approach about how to look at things. And there's a couple things that I would say from a contracting officer's proposal. I want to debunk a couple of myths right off the bat. Win themes mean absolutely nothing to the government. They're not catching them. It doesn't matter if you put them in their face. It doesn't really do anything to ultimately influence it. It helps with the readability. That's really on your side. That kind of helps you focus. So there's some goodness to it. But once you throw it over the fence to the government, your win themes really, I don't think I ever once said, oh, here's a proposal. This is the clear win theme for this company, and it has influenced me. So there's number one. Number two, if you're developing a proposal, there's a whole bunch of conversation about, well, I want the government to think this, and let's put it in the executive summary, and then we'll shape the thinking. It really doesn't. Most of the sub teams and the proposal evaluation don't read the executive summary. They only read their section. And when they talk about everything needs to be standalone, it needs to be standalone. What we would often do is, let me use the graphic of old school, when you had to provide the binder and the binder was tabbed out in 5 different sections. What I would do is old school. I remember one of my first jobs as a lieutenant was I had to rip apart all those binders and make new binders so that the technical team for evaluation factor number 1 had each one of the sections from each one of the binders for evaluation factor number 1. They didn't see anything else. They didn't see the executive summary. They didn't see the rest of the documentation that was provided. They didn't see the CPARs. They didn't see past performance. They didn't see anything. They only saw that one section that we ripped out. So a lot of times a contracting officer, the team, the evaluation team will say, look, you've got 10 proposals. Your job, and Fred, I'm going to pick on you just because you're at the top right corner of my screen. Your job, Fred, is to give me a coordinated evaluation of those 10 for section 1, whatever that might be, or evaluation criteria, technical 1.1. And I don't care what else you do. I don't need you to do anything else. So if you're Fred and you say, oh, I've got 10 rocks to crush, I don't really care about anything else. I'm just going to do the piece in front of me because it becomes overwhelming. And oh, by the way, I've got a deadline. And oh, by the way, they're not letting me out of the building, or they're not letting me do anything else until I get this done. So you're not going to take any time to go and cross look into anything else. So as you're writing proposals, you really want to do a couple of key things for the government. And this is what I thought was brilliant. You basically have to assume that everybody's reading a ton, and they have the attention span of a gnat. So I always talk, you've heard the word bottom line up front, bluff. If you really want to like really get impactful proposals, what I loved, and I can't speak to, there's no rule about this, but what I really liked was for each section, if there was one synopsis summary right up front, it said, hey, we're going to do this and this. We're going to crush it because of this and this. All the details follow. So at this point, you've already convinced me of what you want me to take away, and then everything else just reinforces that and gives me some material to make my comments that, hey, this is how they're going to approach it. There were times when I would lift, copy and paste narrative right out of a proposal because it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed as an evaluator. But the key on this one is, if you make me search, if you're going to say, no, you got to read everything, so I want you to really understand, you have a risk of losing your audience. So each section, technical, and if you look at the range of the things you're trying to influence, the pieces that are specifically evaluated, this is where you really want to be careful with this. The contract responsibility determination is really cut and dry. Don't spend too much time there. Just answer their questions. Provide the reps and certs, provide the certifications of whatever that is, based on whatever the demand signal from the contracting team. The technical narrative, if you are being evaluated and the technical is the most important or is a significant portion of this is where you really want to make sure you make it easy for the evaluators and the people who are defending their evaluation. So put something really clear up front. One of my favorite quotes is Lincoln said, I wrote a 2-page letter because I didn't have time to write a 1-page letter. And it's true. If you really want to craft something down to be succinct and very impactful, and you can use AI, drop in your technical evaluation, say, generate a one sentence summary or 2 simple paragraph summary in 4th grade English of this body of work. And then look at it. Don't just drop that into make sure it actually very nicely covers that. So I'd say that's a really important piece for technical. When it gets into everything else, let me step back. Whatever level that you're generating a proposal, whether it is a response to an RFQ, which is a quote, you're just throwing numbers down. There's nothing else. Or it's extremely complicated all the way into major weapon systems. The key is, and I would guarantee that every contracting officer is going to tell you the same thing. Read the question, answer the question. So when I review proposals for people and they say, okay, because I, I don't like to write because I don't know your business. I don't understand what people do. So when I read a proposal for like a red team review, honestly, it comes down to very simple. I read the question and make sure you answer the question. And so as a contract officer, one of the things that frustrated me the most is I'd get a proposal and I knew the company was world class, one of the big fives or something like that. And I'd be looking for a simple thing. Describe how you're going to staff this effort. Okay. Answer the question. Don't make me go in and try to extrapolate your approach to something because I can't do it. I mean, I know what I think it should be, or I have a baseline for what I'm looking for. But at the end of the day, I cannot emphasize enough that the biggest fails I've ever seen was, I mean, and this company is the right one. They might be the incumbent and they're crushing it, but they just didn't answer the question. So I cannot give them a rating that I know that they honestly deserve. And every once in a while, as a contracting officer, I might find some opportunity to go and open negotiations so I can say, hey, did you want to actually answer the question here so I can evaluate it honestly and give you what the level that is where you're competing at. I think if you have only one takeaway, it's read the question, answer the question. And I don't know how to emphasize that more. I'll probably repeat it a dozen times, but it's just because that is the number one thing. So let me put a little bit of a spin on this, and then I'll open it up to questions because Rick said that really the key here is to give you guys a chance to ask questions. Um, as a contracting officer, that is the single person who is responsible for adhering to federal law, the person who's answerable to the chain all the way up to Congress. So a contracting officer's authority doesn't come from anywhere inside the government except for Congress. It's directly from Congress. So if I'm a contracting officer and my commander comes in and says, hey, you need to do this XYZ, I want you to go this way or that way, the answer is no. I can say no to anybody in the entire chain of command, all the way up to the chief of staff of the Air Force. And anybody who gets in the way of that and directs contracting officers to make a decision actually puts themselves in great jeopardy. And there's a lot of examples of that throughout history where people have overstepped that boundary and gotten in a lot of trouble. The contracting officer is responsible because that authority comes directly from Congress. It doesn't go through the four-star. It doesn't go through anybody in the chain of command. So to be clear about that, when the contracting officer releases an RFP, they have effectively gone through the entire thing and said, okay, we have a clear method of of stating what the requirement is for the proposal and then evaluating what is provided to us so that we have a clear, and we've told everybody, and here's the method that we will use to select the winner. This is great because technically the government has to throw the playbook on the table for you. They have to tell you exactly how things are going to work. And protests come along when the government doesn't do what the government said it was going to do. That's ultimately the fairness factor. The way the federal space works is I tell you exactly what I'm looking for. I tell you exactly what format I want you to give it to me in. I tell you what I'm going to do to evaluate it. And I tell you exactly how I'm going to select the winner on this. So you've all seen hopefully some different RFPs. And again, I'm talking like in that, let's just say the 10 million range, nothing too extravagant, but it requires a level of effort that's multiple volumes. Even if it's the very low end of just a simple response to a very complicated response, the same thing applies. The government has to be transparent. The thing that you got to remember from a contract officer's perspective is no contract officer can do all that on their own. They rely on teams and they have limited experience. You have only a few contracting officers out there that could probably do this entire thing from scratch without and get it sequenced beautifully. A lot of contracting officers are copying pieces from previous acquisitions, or they'll go into a system like there's a couple of Conwrite was one of the contract writing systems, and there's a bunch of them now, but ultimately they're designed to generate the RFP. Well, very few people really can read an RFP from page one all the way to the end and all the attachments and actually have a picture of what that clear requirement is. and the clear process and everything I just laid out. Contracting officers are supposed to do that, but it's a heavy lift and they're human. So a lot of times you'll see RFPs that come out and it's just a mess. There's a bunch of clauses in there that don't even make sense for what you're doing, or there's a bunch of conflicting requirement in section L and evaluation factors in section M, or the PWS or the statement of work it's got its own. This doesn't even make sense, or their type of contract. They want a fixed price, but they want all the cost elements to go along with it. They want to know 10,000 details about how many hours and minutes you're going to work and who's going to do what, but they don't want to give you the cost structure with that. There's a lot of things that can be just messy. So an RFP will go out and it's going to have problems. So when you look at that RFP, it's important for you to say, okay, there's a bunch of stuff here. I see that it's a mess. We get it. We're just going to respond to this. It's not going to be a huge impact. But every once in a while, you look at something and say, if I do this and this conflict is there, it can be disastrous for our ability to win, or if we do win. And that's when you want to use the questions and the interchange with the government to make sure that everything's okay. And just a key note, the question and answer period ends if you identify a material defect in the whole overall structure. There is nothing that stops you from reaching out to the contract officer and say, hey, this isn't a question, but this is something that we're highlighting because I don't know, maybe you not realize that you've got a train wreck built into your solicitation, and either we don't understand it or you missed it. And it's okay. It's like help the contracting officer out. It doesn't necessarily mean you get an advantage. What it does mean is that you paint yourself as a responsive, good partner, and that does influence the team in a way that you can't measure and nobody can actually put on paper, but it matters. So your questions matter at that point. So the RFP is put together. The government has to be transparent. From your perspective, here it is again. Look at that RFP, no matter how small or large or messy or clean it is. Read the question, answer the question. Section L is your guidebook where the contract officer has tried really hard to say, give me exactly this, and you'll be on target. And then we'll evaluate it this way and choose the award this way. But sometimes it doesn't make it doesn't make sense, and that doesn't matter. Just answer the question. There may be factors that the government needs to evaluate because of elements you may or may not know about, especially if you're trying to break into a new area. So I've talked for about 20 minutes. What I'd like to do is take a break and just see if anybody has specific questions. I think our bounded topic is about proposal writing, and I'll lean it into what's going on in the government's mind when they're doing evaluation if you want some questions on that. But pause there. Anybody have a question?
I have a question. How can I get more tips and advice from Colonel Orndorff? Well, my friends, in order to get that, you have to join our certification program. This is a recording of our weekly sales call. So Lewis jumped on this past week and really to rave reviews. I think the students like listening to him more than me. So I might have to put him on some more. Our certification program, by the way, is really robust. It's doing great things. The training is excellent. And this is designed for individuals that want to start a consulting business in this space. We're teaching them, first of all, the government contracting process, what they need to know to help companies, teaching them how to walk companies through developing their own niche, building a sales plan. We help each individual student develop their own niche within this space. Some of them want to be involved with proposal writing, just like we were talking about. Others want to be business developers, lead generators, working with certifications, GSA schedules. There's so many different areas you could focus on. It's really interesting work. And the great thing is after we teach them the steps that they need to learn in order to sell to the government and to help others, then we show them how to start their own consulting business. So you're not just left wondering at the end of this, what do we do? We show you how to start a business. We show you how to find your first leads. We show you how to sell an initial offer to those leads and close your first clients. And we show you how to turn them into a monthly retainer or monthly fee-based work. So you can build that monthly recurring revenue coming in, which really as a solopreneur, there are very few things I can think of where you can generate the kind of income that you can doing something like this. So if that's something you're interested in, go on over to goclose.com, check out the certification program. And look, if you guys are getting value from this podcast, please go to our YouTube channel, DoD Contract Academy. We are 10 times bigger today on YouTube than we were just 3 months ago. That's 10x, but still we are far behind I'll call them competition. There aren't too many people on YouTube talking about government contracting. I get a lot of people coming to us basically a little dismayed from hearing maybe some misinformation out there, and are glad to find some people that are actually willing to tell them the truth. So, and the truth is it's not easy. It takes a long time, but you can make a lot of money. It's very profitable. You can drive significant revenue to your business or somebody else's business in this space, but you got to know what the proper steps are. It's not get rich quick. You can forget about middleman. If you've heard that term, please just get it out of your mind. Sure. It's a curse word in my house. So please, if you like the podcast, head on over to YouTube. Help us surpass our competitors. Recommend it to other people that may be interested in government contracting. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate you guys listening. And we will see you next week. Thanks again.